But a lot of times our brain thinks that if we're staying in the same, we're not giving anything up, but you are. You're giving up future you. You're giving up a new career. You're giving up a lot of other opportunities. And I think when you kind of reframe it in that way, it starts helping you understand like that part of my life maybe is over and I'm ready to kind of embrace what else is out there. Cause it's kind of that abundance mentality and like, there's so much more I can do. And so how do I focus more on that instead of the fear of like what I'm letting go?
Welcome to the Push Podcast. Why push? Because a nudge is just too friendly.
And friend, we're here to help you get your shit together. I'm Eddie.
And I'm Janelle.
And we're the Copelands.
We've got 3 daughters, 2 businesses, a mortgage, and lots of responsibilities. So just like you, we're struggling to find that perfect balance of ambitious go-getter hustle while still staying present, loving our kids, and working on our relationship.
And doing the laundry, going to the grocery store. Oh, and don't forget being mindful.
Yeah, all of the stuff. So if you're juggling all the things, but you're also trying to get to the next level, guess what? You're in the right place. So get ready to be pushed. Hey guys, you're listening to episode number 26 of the Push Podcast. And how are you today, Edward Copeland?
I am fantastic.
So we are here today with one of my good friends. Her name is Kalkhoran, and she's actually, you can't see her, but she is Instagramming us right now. So what up, IG? I want to tell you a little bit about her because I think she's just golden, and I wanted to share her magic with you guys. So she is a lawyer turned entrepreneur, which in her words is a fancy way of saying that she's a quitter. She was an attorney. She was a lawyer. She went to school. It was her lifelong dream to become an attorney. She practiced law, I think, for like 6 to 8 years. I'm going to let you tell your whole story. But then she realized, you guys, she freaking hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it. And then I think that friends and family, kind of the pressure of facing them and telling them like, hey, I want to be a quitter, something that you've spent your whole life chasing, like people think that you're crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to bring her on because if you guys missed it, a couple episodes ago, I announced that I was going to be a quitter too.
Yeah.
So I announced that we were officially selling the Cake Mama's Bakery, and that was in episode 24. And I thought it would be really cool to introduce you to some of the people that I hold in high regard, that I bounce ideas off of, that don't hold me back, but instead encourage me and tell me that the world's not going to end if I decide to pivot. And without further ado, you guys, this is my good friend Kalkhoran, and I'm so excited to introduce her to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
We're really excited to have you.
Absolutely. I am.
Congrats on quitting. Let me just start with that and say I'm so freaking proud of you guys.
Yes. We've been talking about it for a while.
I know.
Because I started pursuing a different career and found major passion. And I, at some point I do want to talk about, I want you to tell your whole story, but at some point I want you to talk about the fact that you work with people who don't know what their next steps are going to be, who know that they hate their lives and their careers now, but that makes it even more scary to quit when you don't know. And that's where you were, right?
Totally. Yeah. I was very much in the camp of like, well, I have no other skills or passion. So what are we going to do now?
Right.
And I think a lot of people find themselves like realizing like I'm deeply unhappy, but I have no idea what the next step is. And so a lot of times it's like, well, I'll just sit in certainty at least. Like even if I'm unhappy, at least I know what this is. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? And so you end up staying. And I think for me, that was really the most I was like the hardest part of this whole journey was just even uncovering like what am I actually passionate about? What do I actually want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I want to really discover on in our conversation is like, when do you double down? Because some people are listening right now going, okay, should I quit or should I like go all in or should I, go in a different direction? And what does that mean for me? What am I missing out on? I think in this society now, we think that if we choose something, we're going to miss something important instead of it being something that you embrace and saying, hey, I'm going to go all in on this and really just enjoy this path.
Absolutely. I mean, that is such one of our biggest fears, right? Is we look at this called also the sunk cost fallacy. So you look at like, well, I've already put all this time and money and energy. I've already built up this career. I've done so much. Am I just going to quote unquote throw it all away? I'm going to this new thing. And what you were just saying too is like, whenever you're looking kind of backwards at that sunk cost, you're not looking at the opportunity cost that you're giving up by staying in that same position, because it's always a trade-off, right? So like, yes, you may double down on that thing and stay and build it up, and that's great. But then you're giving up the chance to do other things. And you have to be kind of understand that a lot of times our brain thinks that if we're staying in the same, we're not giving anything up, but you are. You're giving up future you. You're giving up a new career. You're giving up a lot of other opportunities. And I think when you kind of reframe it in that way, it starts helping you understand like that part of my life maybe is over and I'm ready to kind of embrace what else is out there, because it's kind of that abundance mentality, and like there's so much more I can do. And so how do I focus more on that instead of the fear of like what I'm letting go?
Yeah, I love that. So
absolutely.
I want you to tell everybody like where you started though. You wanted to be a lawyer from being a little girl, right?
Yeah. I was kind of the quintessential like type A personality that was, I was blessed enough to be good at school. So I never really even questioned that path. Like when you get praised and you're doing well and all your teachers and your parents and everybody is happy, you're just like, well, I'm doing the right thing. Like I'm clearly succeeding, And so I just put my head down and I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and I literally never looked up. I just like powered through school. I got good grades. My focus, it's always like the next thing, like how do I get into a good college? Okay, now I'm in college. How do I get a good LSAT score? How do I get into a good law school? Okay, what law school am I going to go to? And I didn't really have lawyers in my family. I didn't have lawyers around me. I didn't really understand what being a lawyer meant. I was and still am very much interested in the law. And so I always felt like this is aligned with me because I find it very interesting. Like I like learning about the law. I like having, seeing what's happening with the Supreme Court and all that stuff. And so I never even there wasn't even an ounce of doubt as like, maybe I'm not, I kind of hate this. This is hard. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Like I didn't have that. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. This is going to happen. And this is my path. And I'm going to be, I'm going to ride off into the sunset and be like super happy. And then when that didn't happen, that's when I started having these like, and this was like, mind you, after I was, I spent over $100,000 on my education. I had spent years and years and years studying. I had passed the bar. I'd worked as an attorney, and it was like, oh, wow, now what? Like now I'm really stuck in it. So.
Well, I heard you say before that like school wasn't easy, but it was pretty simple. Like you had to apply yourself. There was a framework. All you had to do was go up. And then you couple that with what you said, like I was getting the praise and the accolades from my parents and my teachers. And so I think it's important to spend a little bit of time there, because you've probably seen this with some of your clients, right? Like you go down this path that feels like it's a good fit, and it feels, but then at some point, did you find that was misleading? You were leading into comfort maybe?
100%. I think it obviously wasn't too late because I ended up changing and it's been a glorious change, but I didn't really think about that until I was done with law school and I was working as a lawyer. But when I reevaluated, I realized like, oh, it wasn't that I loved studying. It was that I loved praise. It was I loved like people thinking I was good enough, or that I was smart enough, or that I was like the whatever enoughness I felt like I needed to be in order to, and I don't, to be fair, like I have the most loving parents. It's not that I felt like it was conditional on that, but I did learn from an early age this like people pleasing tendency that I think so many of us are socialized with, where it's like, don't rock the boat, just do what's asked of you. And wow, you're actually doing it better than everyone else. Well, that feels good. So just keep doing it. Like you're getting the top grade and like you're right on the right track. And you don't, I think when you're a child, you don't have the wherewithal to question it. Like, I didn't have the thing to think like, why are we doing this as a society? And I just felt like, okay, like I'm winning this game. Whatever this game is, like I figured it out. I'm doing well. And so I'm not even going to like question it. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah. And we talked about this in an episode where we talked about rejection and the power of acceptance, right? And when we feel that what we're doing is acceptable, what we're doing is praised, why do anything else? Like there's no reason. And we've toyed around with an episode where we want to talk about like when people feel out of place, right? Doing something super, super scary that you feel like, oh my God, am I going to feel out of place? Am I going to feel like I don't belong here?
Yeah.
And for you, you took that amazing leap. And there's so many things I want to ask you, but I want to make sure that you kind of covered ground on your story.
Yeah, sure. So, one thing I'll say really quickly about that rejection thing, then I think another component that I'm really fascinated with, and I now watching my own children and watching my nieces who are a little bit older, is we, with all good intentions as parents, like we want to protect our children. And a lot of what we do and what happened with me and what happens with a lot of kids is you get funneled into that thing that you are good at. So like if you're a good athlete or if you're a good student, it's like you get more praise and people kind of push you to do better. And whether it's just to protect, like let's say your kid goes out for a baseball team and they don't get on the baseball team the second year, third year, by like the third year, you're kind of like, maybe you should try something else. But what we're doing is like, we're also teaching that like failure is scary. Like only go for the thing that you're succeeding at, only focus on the stuff you're good at. And so what that instills is not just rejection, but this fear of failure that we have, like the attachment that we put to failure of like what it means about us, as opposed to like, I just tried something and it didn't work, but like, let me explore, let me see what I like, let me try different things just for the fun of trying it. Like so many, even now, it's like kids are put into sports at like 7 and they're expected to, go on to scholarships. And it's like, maybe that kid could just be a 7-year-old that's like, should be allowed to try whatever they want to try. And I look at that for myself and it's like, I never did anything that I could remotely fail at. Like I only focused on the things that I was going to quote unquote succeed at and be good at. Like I wouldn't take classes that I knew I'm not going to do well. And if I heard like the teacher was going to be super hard, it's like, I'm only going to get the good grades. And like that is just such a bad focus because I missed out on so many things I could have learned, or just like things I could have learned about myself, things I could have had experiences with. And so I think it's like an ancillary to rejection is also this failure of what we think is failure and how we kind of prime our kids to only want to succeed.
I love that. That's powerful.
That is, and I want to just add to that because that's amazing because not only that, it's almost like you're seeking achievement instead of seeking the opportunity to really explore life, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that we all are we all do that. I mean, even with our kids, like, should I do this? You think I'll be good at it? Yeah, I think you'll be good at it.
Yeah.
Well, instead of saying, well, maybe you won't, and maybe you'll just have some fun, and maybe you'll learn, and that'll be okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I told you earlier that I was at this Brendan Burchard event last week, and it was interesting because the event was about, that's great that you're successful, but here's how you get to the level of excellence, right? And he literally said this thing that pierced my soul. He said, some of you are so good that good is what's really holding you back. He said, some of you are so talented and you've gotten so far with your innate God-given talent that the talent is what's holding you back from really trying things. And I was like, I think he stabbed me in my heart. Literally.
That is really good.
And then we had a breakout session and I met 5 people in my group that were like, this guy said exactly what you just said. He said, I've literally never even taken a class where there was an opportunity for me to not be good at it. And so I think it happens more times than we think, right? It's just like, what will I be good at? Because you feel like it's an indicator that this is the path you should take. It's the path of least resistance. It's the thing that it might be my God-given calling, right? So how do we determine like what are we saying, I guess, in this, like as children, as parents, what are we saying?
I think that for me, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I try to remind myself, for myself even, and for my children, is that what happens is we as a society, and we're taught very early on, we attach a meaning to failure, right? If it was just like, oh, you tried something and it failed, and then you could then go try something else, we would be much more open to it. But even, it's not just children. Like why, I'm sure the majority of people you talk to have this dream that they want to do, but it's like, oh, I can't put out that Instagram account. I can't start this thing. Like, why not? Right? Because what if it doesn't work? What if people don't buy? What if people look at me and whatever? And the thing is when you go one layer deeper, it's like, okay, so what? Let's say it doesn't work. Let's just like imagine. What are you making that mean about you? You're making that mean like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough to have a business. I don't have enough of a business acumen. Whatever you're making that mean, clearly you don't want to try, because if you confirm that, that's a painful thing to think like, I'm not smart enough to do something, right? But what if there wasn't that meaning attached? Like, what if it was just like, oh, I'm a human being that tried something and it didn't work. And now I can try, I'm free to try something else. And I think that's where I try to like really, even with myself, because I still have the fear, like I want to try something new in my business and I get super scared and I kind of have to check myself and be like, it's not like failure, like, oh my God, it's this huge failure. It's like, all right, I tried 10 different things and 2 of them worked. And we don't need to worry. It doesn't mean that those 8 things mean I'm a, horribly like bad business person. It just means that like I tried things, and I think that has kind of shifted it for me a little bit.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And we've talked and I've said this in live events, we've said it on the podcast, that to me, there's nothing more clear than failure, right? And when you don't know what you're going to do, when you don't know what's next, doing something and then hopefully you get an opportunity to fail, and that gives you so much clarity of what to do next or what adjustments you need to make. And one of the things I just wanted to ask you was like, how did you not fall victim of the sunk cost bias, right?
Yeah.
Because so many people right now are listening to this going, I spent 10 years at this place. I spent 20 years at this company. I can't just walk away.
Right. Yeah. And you had $100,000 in debt.
Yeah. So I didn't at the time.
Your parents want to kill you.
Right. Exactly. I didn't at the time that I was quitting. Actually, I think probably the only smart move that I made was when I left law school, because my situation was I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer to make a lot of money. Like I wanted to work in positions that I was very passionate about. And those were typically not well-paying jobs. So I wanted to work for the government. I wanted to work in public interest for nonprofits. And so what I did was I went to a big law firm that paid me a lot of money. In the first 2 years, I saved all my money and I paid off my loans. So I did that so that I could have these jobs that weren't going to pay me that much. And I didn't have this suffocating student loan payment every month. So I didn't have the $100,000 when I was quitting. I'd paid off all my loans. But to go back to your question, I did still have a ton of that fear and thought of like, how can I throw this all away? I've only ever been known as a lawyer, like somebody that's going to law school, somebody that's a lawyer, like that's my only identity. I had no idea what I even liked. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I don't want to make it seem like I was like, I'm just going to make this decision and I'm going to quit. I wrestled with this for over a year. I didn't admit to anybody that I was leaving for over a year. I struggled mightily with this decision because you're constantly afraid of like, am I going to regret this? Am I going to ruin my life? If I'm going to walk away and then, what if I can't get another job? And what if I, you start kind of going like playing it out. And in your mind, if you leave your mind unchecked, like you end up like homeless under a bridge, right? You're like, I'm going to do this and it's going to ruin my whole life. Everyone's going to hate me. And so I had a lot of that. How I got over it was, I will credit my husband. He is without a doubt the reason I quit, because he's like such a supportive, loving person. And he really pushed me, because when I was having these doubts, he was the one actually, Janelle, when we were just saying how like it was a simple path. I remember this conversation we were having and I was telling him how miserable I was, how unhappy I was. And he was saying like, well, you've always taken the easy path. And I swear to God, I almost like flipped over the table. Like it was like New Jersey housewife style. I was like, how dare you? I've studied for my entire life. Like, But I realized what he meant was that the reason I was so scared to leave is because there was no other path. And I wanted someone to tell me what I need to do, because like I was so scared at that idea of like, I don't know, do whatever, like figure it out. And so, but through a lot of conversations with him, he really opened my eyes. He would say to me like, okay, you tried something, you tried it for 10 years. You're going to stick with it for another 30 years just because you don't want to give up like that makes no sense. You
what are you, stupid?
Yeah, exactly. Literally. It's like, how does this make any sense in your mind? Like you already know you hate it and you have to work for another 40 years and you're going to just do it just so you can say you didn't quit. Like that seems dumb,
Like there's no medal for that, right?
No, totally.
That's what I don't understand is like, you wouldn't have earned a medal for that. You would have instead robbed yourself of all of these gifts that now you get to explore and experience.
And happiness. I would have robbed myself of happiness, like living a life that I'm happy in. He said that once to me too. It was so funny because I kept saying like, well, what am I going to tell people? And he's like, people feel sorry for you when you say you're a lawyer, right? Like he's like, it's not that badge of an honor. Like everyone knows your life is, and I was like laughing because we put ourselves, we think that it's this bigger deal. And I mean, he was being tongue in cheek, like joking with me, but I think like we just get stuck in our own way. We think that it's this huge deal. And it's like, it's so funny. I had made up, all of like the world I thought was going to like swallow me whole. I thought all my colleagues were going to like, banish me, not talk to me. I thought my parents, oh my God, imagine like telling immigrant parents who moved here and like had to work at a 7-Eleven that you just like don't like your job. It's like, I'm sorry, what? Like we gave up our whole lives to come here and you're not happy?
Great.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're such a spoiled brat. And I felt like that. I was so nervous and I was so surprised by the reception that I got when I finally started telling people that like I'm not happy.
So you were consumed with these thoughts, this downward spiral for a year.
Yeah.
And then finally your husband was like, girl, you're not going to die.
So throughout that year, I mean, basically what had happened is in the beginning, just as backup, I had my son. We had to move states. So I had to quit my job and I was looking for a job. So at the time I was home with a newborn and I was looking for another job. And I kept like having literal like physical reactions to reading these job descriptions. Like I would get this like, I felt like I was nauseous. Yeah, literally. I would like have panic attacks. I would want to like throw up. I would have like this pit in my stomach and I would read it. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And I would like my husband would come home from work and I would just tell him like I've been applying for jobs and I'd be like in tears. And he's like, why are you doing this? And he planted a seed early on because he's like, well, why don't you try something else? And I remember like rolling my eyes and be like, oh, just try something else? Like I'm a lawyer. What are you talking about? Try something else. But he planted that seed. And over that year, it started with like, but could I try something else? Like, what would that something else be? What do I even like? And so it was kind of this like internal battle that I was going through, but I was getting more and more brave. Like I would read things, I would listen to podcasts, I would see other people do it. And it started going from just like the seed that was planted to like, maybe I can do something else. Maybe like maybe it's not crazy for me to say that I want to leave this. Like, and so by the end of the year when I was ready to tell, I mean, I had made up my mind. I'd gotten to the point where I was like, the same conversation. I'd read so much in personal development that I was like, this is insane that I'm giving up my life because I'd made a decision when I was, 10 years old or at 22 when I was going to law school that like, I'm going to do this. So now I have to do this for the rest of my life. Like that's crazy. So I started getting more confident in my decision that like, I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to sit and just like, because it's the status quo, because it's certain, because it's comfortable, in the sense that I knew what it was, not in the sense that I was happy, but so it was very uncomfortable actually. But I finally kind of got up the courage to tell people with like a straight face without wanting to throw up, to say like, I'm quitting. And like, now I can handle your opinion. Cause for a long time I couldn't handle other people's opinions because I was racked with so much self-doubt and like, what if this is the wrong move, that I had to get myself to a place that like, I felt sure enough that I could handle other people's questions, which a lot of them had a lot of questions of like why I was doing this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you feel like as you started to talk to people that you
So really that was more of like the year thing.
Okay. No, I was saying as you started to talk to people, did you find like you were really shaping the understanding of why you needed to do something different?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I find that a lot of times when you don't know like clearly why you want something different, you just feel the feeling. And as you start to really have to step out there and tell people, it really starts to take form and it starts to shape in your mind exactly why, hey, I got to do something different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all like an evolution and you're still figuring it out. And so with every conversation, and I would hear people's objections or like, and they were coming from a well-meaning place. They just wanted me to be safe. And they're kind of ingrained in this thought process of society of like, keep a safe job and, we're not all happy and work doesn't need to make you happy or whatever. But what also would happen is like a lot of times when I would hear these objections, it would like, I finally had kind of made this switch where it started sounding crazy to me. And I was like
that's your life.
Yeah,
that's
totally. Totally.
Happy. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it solidified my decision. Because I would think like, why are you so invested in me doing a job that has nothing to do with you? Like, why does it trigger you so much that I want to try? I mean, you're not paying my bills. You're not like living my life. You're not going into this office every day. Why do you feel so passionate that I should stay in a place when I'm telling you that it's making me unhappy? And so it was like a very, not like out of body experience, but it was interesting to kind of watch people kind of from like and go through the conversations, but think like in the back of my head, this is so interesting. This is so fascinating. Like, why do you care so much? Or why are you so committed to being miserable in your own job? Like, what is that like serving you, you know? And so it did do this funny thing where like it actually very much solidified my decision.
I agree with you. I got to say this because I feel like when I started to share with friends and family that I wanted to sell the bakery, before even asking like, oh my God, I know that you've been juggling these two things and like you look like you're traveling and doing so much. Before even asking or inquiring, the first thing they'd say is, oh my God, why?
Yeah.
Everybody loves the cake mamas. I'm like, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And
totally.
I experienced exactly what you're talking about. It was almost like, well, I was coaching you on a decision that I was already coming to grips with that I knew was the right decision. But then watching people's reaction, I could see you are stuck in your own life. Oh, come to think of it, you've had the same job for 30, 40 years. Oh, come to think of it, you're not really into personal development or growing and expanding your thought process or your lens, the way you view the world, right? It didn't become like, oh, I'm judging you, but it very much validated that I was on the right path.
Totally.
And you said something a second ago that I want to ask you about. You said I was in a transition, I had my son, and I very much believe that we're in seasons of life. And from the time that you were 12 to 22, that was the season of I'm going to be a lawyer, right? And then after you had your son, did that season changing,
100%.
did that have anything to do with your shift?
100%. I mean, I think that I had been unhappy from when I became a lawyer. So like I had been happy in like the 7 years that I practiced. I think that kids have a funny way of really quickly putting your priorities in check and kind of realigning what is really important to you. And so I would be lying if I said, of course, becoming a mother just was a huge shift in my life. And so what I thought, it's very easy before you have kids to say like, oh, I'm going to keep working, I'm going to do this. And I thought I would just go back to work. It would be the same because I knew I didn't really want to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to have something outside of raising children. I wanted to have my own thing. And I thought at the time it was law. And I remember when I had him and we moved, I was like, it was just like it wasn't even a question. I just kept thinking like, I cannot go back to work. He is so small. Like I do not want to leave this little baby that is like completely reliant on me. And that was a shift that I didn't expect in myself. Like I thought I was like, oh, I'll do the 3 months. I'll go back. I'll be fine. Like I'd always been like a really hard worker. I'd always worked really extreme hours. I just didn't think that it would affect me. And it definitely rocked my world. And it was very much
supposed to be super women and like handle it all and go right back to work. And it does shift you.
Yeah.
And I had the shift and I'm way farther ahead of you. You know, my kids are 14, 16, and 18. But this year when Jasmine went away to college, it shifted my whole
100%.
perspective. And I thought, well, here we are, like an older kid finishing her career as a high school student. And then we're sending her off to experience something new. And then after 4 years, she'll go experience something. Why can't I experience something new? And that's really what kind of helped with that. I have another student, her name's Andrea Soto. She owns a bakery in like Silicon Valley. She's an empty nester, fully all grown kids. They're gone now. And she's like, but what is next? Like I feel the shift. And so I really want to introduce her to your community.
Yeah, I would love that. I think what you're saying is a huge point in all of this that I kind of learned the harder way through with this shift in law. But it's what you were just saying is like, we are constantly evolving as human beings, as we should, right? Like hopefully you're not the same person that you were when you were 20 or when you're 30 or when you're 40. Like hopefully you're learning things, you're evolving, you're becoming a different person, your interests. Why is it that even people that love their jobs after a while, let's say after 10 years, start getting bored because you want something new. You want like, as human beings, we need growth. We need change. Or like you watch a child, like they're never just like, oh, I learned to sit. I'm good here. I'm just going to stay here. Like, we're good. We'll call it a day. Like, no, I'm going to try to learn to crawl. I'm going to try to learn to walk.
Fifth grade is really made for me.
Yeah. We're just not going to try any harder after that. But what I think is that we haven't been taught that. It just hasn't been in the kind of collective mindset. And I think it's happening, but it's like your mindset, your personality, your values, everything when you have little children is different than when you have big children. And then when you have children that leave, like you shift your identity, right? Your relationship with your husband changes when your kids leave. Like all this stuff changes. And if we kind of accept that like it is kind of like a death and a rebirth, right? Like for me, it's like when I had my child, like there was the death of like single, me just worrying about myself, single goalie. I mean, I was married, but I'm just saying like I only really had to worry about my husband could take care of himself. And it was this rebirth of like me as a mother where like the rest of my life I will worry about another being, right? And so even that is such a like seismic shift, and there's so much, and now there's so much more conversations around what mothers go through and all of the mental and emotional things about that shift. But I think it happens in everything, right? It happens when you're single and you get married. It happens when you're in school and then you go to work. It's like you're taking on these new identities, and once we can kind of accept like it's okay to change, it's okay to say like this was okay for that season, but what is my new season? What is the next thing? What can I look forward to? Like you should always have goals, even if you're 90, like you're still on this earth. So like, what is the next thing that you want to experience? Like, I think if we can start adopting that mentality, we would be a lot better off than thinking that we have to stay in the same box that we've always been.
And it's interesting because you were talking about, and you were too as well, how people will, when you tell them something like that, they're sitting there projecting the conversation they had with themselves when they had the moment where they said, I hate this.
Right.
And they either ignored it or they justified it, or maybe they didn't think they had any options of changing, but they are really projecting that conversation. I think that people do that. And I think that's what really validates it for you. You see, oh, well, this is the conversation you had with yourself 20 years ago that you decided to say, whether you gave into fear or whatever the case was for that person. I think that is truly real. And when you said that, when you talked about making sure at 90, like I had a moment this weekend where we were with some older folks. And
my grandparents, we'll call them out.
and I'm watching like not
close to
80s. And I'm watching like,
their
routine and everything. And it was like, I was like, they're not striving for anything and it's no judgment on them. But what happens is do you get to a place where you're waiting to die? Like you get this like routine and you're like, I'm gonna drink my coffee, I'm gonna eat my toast, and I'm just gonna wait until I don't do that. I can't do this anymore. Right. And then I was telling Janelle, I said, I just finished watching, this movie with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and they're almost 80. Yeah. And they're making feature
100%.
films.
100%. There's so much now, luckily with the internet, you can see like there's so many stories of people that are like 80-year-old like bodybuilders. Like all this stuff. And I do think it's like a shift again in the paradigm. Like back in the day, maybe there wasn't as much opportunity, but I agree with you that there is this. My grandmother passed away a couple of years ago, but she lived with us for like 20 years. And from when I was like 10, she was, I don't know, now I'm like thinking back, she was probably like late 60s. So like for that generation, they thought that was old. She literally lived until I was like 30. So like for 20 years, she would tell me every year, like I like try to get her to do things. And she's like, well, like, I'm going to die any day now. So, and like, she was kind of like depressed, but like, she would say this stuff. And I'm like, but you're not going to die any day now. Like, this is not happening. So like, let's do something with that. Let's figure this out. And
lives 20 years later.
Literally lives 20 years later. And so I think now, especially like people are coming, seeing this because the whole like retirement age at 65, it's like, you have another 30 years, maybe, 20 for sure. A lot of them, I have 20 years. Like, you can have a whole new career in 20 years. Like this isn't like, let's hang it up. Like it's over now, And I think people are seeing that now, but it's hard. Like what you were just saying, Eddie, I think that a lot of people, because they just have accepted what society has told them and they might be unhappy. They have like this deep unhappiness, but they think that there's nothing else to do. Like they get very triggered when somebody else is kind of pushing against that grain. And so they feel very defensive and I don't think they understand why, but I see this a lot where it's like they're in a job that they're miserable in. And so they get very triggered when like I say like people should quit and start something else. And it's because they don't see that that's a possibility for themselves for whatever reason. And so it becomes something that like they want, but they just can't figure out like how to be honest with themselves, I guess, about that.
So, and the people that you interview, the people that you work with, like just for the record, you guys, she's teaching people how to quit, not because you're a loser, but because it's not fulfilling you anymore. And there's a big difference, right?
And I wanted to make sure I clarify that because Goalie, you went on your path, right? So often we have people who have yet to start.
Right.
We don't want them to confuse with not starting with quitting.
Right.
Or you find a little resistance, a little bump in the road, and then you quit. That's not what we're doing here, people.
No.
We've got decades in this.
Yeah. No, and that's, my podcast is called Lessons from a Quitter, and it's very tongue in cheek. And obviously I do want to like change the conversation around quitting, because I think if it's not serving you anymore, then you should quit. But it doesn't mean that if it's hard, you should quit. Like that's not, those are two different conversations. It's a matter of really being honest with yourself and only yourself, not like trying to get the answer from everybody else, but really understanding like, what do I want from this one life that I have? I get this no dress rehearsal. This is it. I get to experience what I want to experience. And what is it that I want? And then going after that. And let me tell you, like this path that I'm on is a million times harder than being a lawyer. Like I say this all the time. I talk to a lot of obviously former lawyers on my podcast, and we were joking with a couple girls the other day. And I was like, do you ever just think like, maybe I should just go back? It was so much easier. It was so much easier for someone to just tell me what to do. And I show up at 8 and then I do the work and then I go home and I can watch my Netflix and I don't need to worry about anything. Whereas like every day I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Like, how do I make money from this? Am I going to have enough this month? Can I do, it's like, it's honestly maddening sometimes, but I'm so filled with like a purpose of what I want to do. And I'm so happy and like passionate about what I'm doing that it's like, I'll stick with the hard times because I know I'm on the right path. Right. And I think before it was so hard to stick through the hard times because I knew deep down that I wasn't on the right path. Like I knew this can't be it for me. Like I don't want to be doing this every day.
So let's wrap this up and put a bow on it.
Yeah.
What do we do with the people who we have, they've been in it a decade, they've been in it 20 years, and they're like, this sounds great, but I've got bills. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what my passion is. And I do think that for the record, lots of people throw around like, if you're not passionate about it, don't do it.
No, right.
Passion becomes kind of convoluted at that point.
Totally.
And a lot of people don't know what their purpose is and they don't know. So I know the answer to your story was that you just started trying things.
Yeah.
You put yourself in really uncomfortable situations. You started to go to networking events, even though that was not your thing, and just you became curious, right?
Yeah.
So what are the steps that you teach people or you share with people to either find out what could be next for them and to actually say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen. This podcast got to me. I'm going to quit. Fine. I'll be a quitter, but tell me what to do.
That's a great question. And I wish I had like a packaged answer that I could say for everyone. Like this is the 5 steps.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. But I will say there are a couple of steps. Like one, I think the first and foremost is like being honest with yourself and making that decision that like, listen, I don't know the how. I don't know what it's going to be, but I want to acknowledge that like I am unhappy. And that's okay. And I don't need to feel shame or guilt about like, well, I always hear a lot of people like, a lot of people would kill for this job, or like, I'm so lucky to have, you are. But if you're not happy, then like, who cares? Right. And so I think that really getting quiet and trying to drown out the noise of what everybody says you should do, what your family wants. And, I'm not saying you have to declare it to everybody, but declare it to yourself. Like, okay, I don't know the how, but I know that I don't want this anymore and I want something else. So I'm going to spend my time working on that instead of going back and forth of like, should I, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? Is this the worst decision? Whatever. I think we spend so much of our mental energy just wrestling with the idea that you just have to get to a place where you're making that decision. And then you can open yourself up to like, okay, what am I going to do? And for Claire, I think for people that don't know what they want, I don't know if that's true. There's a book called Finding Your Own North Star by Martha Beck. It's incredible. I think it's perfect for this topic of like figuring out, because the thing is, we've all felt those gut feelings. Like we've all felt that thing deep inside that's telling you like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Or, oh yeah, like you're lit up. Like, that this is, whatever you're doing is like the happiest you've ever been. Right. The thing is we're not taught in our society to listen to that voice. So we don't know like how to discern it. Like, is this really telling me the right thing, or am I, and so we have we get in our head. And so it really is like a coming home to yourself. Like, I think it's really uncovering the layers of like, who am I at my core? Like, what are things that I love doing? I did a lot of like personality tests and a lot of assessments just to figure out like, what makes me tick? Like, what are the things I like doing? What do I want in my next career? And then it's just experimenting. Unfortunately, like, no one's going to be able to tell you what your thing should be, right? It's like you're the only one that knows that. Like, I don't know what you should do, but you do. And so it's a matter of, like what you were just saying, giving yourself time and space to experiment. I think what happens with especially like type A personalities, people that have always kind of been in control, it's like, and I did this, I was like, okay, I want to quit. So I just need to find the next thing so I can succeed at it. I got to figure out what the next thing is now so I can go and be successful within a year. And I would give myself like a year deadline. It was so arbitrary. And by the way, I quit in 2014. It's been 6 years. I still don't know what I'm doing. But like, I just think like you start learning that. Like you start realizing like it doesn't work on that timeline and it doesn't have to. So yeah, maybe you have to stay in your job to pay your bills. But at least you now have a decision. At least you know like, okay, I'm doing this, but I'm going to carve out 3 hours a week to start going to meetup events, to start going to a class. Like maybe I'll take a pottery class or a ceramics class to just get the juices flowing, to get my creativity out there, to, like we were talking about earlier, try and fail at things and see that I'm not going to die. It's not the end of the world. It was just an experience. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to go to conferences. And through that time, you start realizing like, I like this. I don't like this. Like you open, I think for me, and I think a lot of people that I coach and a lot of people I work with, it's sort of like you take the blinders off. You're kind of like, oh my God, there's this whole world out here. People doing amazing things. And you start noticing it and you're like, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do that. And what's funny is I think that's what happened with me. I now have to keep like a journal of all of the things I want to do because I have so many ideas and I have so many passions. And I literally was the person that I thought I am not passionate about one single thing, and I think it's a matter of kind of letting yourself be and letting yourself experience and really getting to know yourself again outside of what everybody else thinks or wants from you. And it kind of comes out, and then it's kind of making that decision and going forward and trying it.
I love that.
And I'll just say this because I think that this is important for people to understand. And we have the one thing I just add to what Gully just said is you have to break the identity that you are what you do, right? In a sense, like I am a lawyer, I am a leader, like all those things, they help in a sense, but they also stifle you.
Absolutely.
And so we are all beings experiencing different experiences.
Yeah.
And as long as we can keep it separated, we can understand we can do anything, right?
Yes.
As long as we know that that's not your identity. You're not a school bus driver. Like you are a person who decided to drive a bus.
Right.
And if you say, I don't want to drive buses anymore, I want to drive a race car. Well, then you got to do what Gully just said. You got to say, how do I get myself into that experience?
Yeah. And I think it's
also important because some people, they have responsibilities, they have kids, they have bills, they're trying to put kids through college, whatever the case may be. But I want to put this perspective like in everyone's head for a moment. You sleep, let's say 8 hours a day. You go to work for 8 hours a day. You still have another 8 hours to do whatever the hell you want to do. That could be experiencing new growth from a podcast on your commute every day. That could be deciding that you're going to read at least one new book every month. That could be a lot of different things that would help expand your perspective in the way that you're looking at this shitty job or this shitty experience that you're having right now. And so I think a lot of times and tell me if I'm wrong, the people we deal with that feel very stuck, they're not maximizing the other 8 hours that are free, right?
Absolutely. I think a couple of things to that point. One, yes, like we are living in the greatest time in history to start a side hustle, to do things on the side. Like back in the day, you couldn't start a business after your job because like you would, it's brick and mortar. You have to like quit, go all in, have all this capital. Like now you can do things from 8 to 11 at night. Every night you can work on stuff, right? So it's absolutely a way of like figuring out, instead of maybe watching Netflix or doing these, scrolling Instagram. I always say this, like people tell me they don't have time and I'm like, okay, let me see the screen time thing on your phone. How much were you on your phone today? It's like nobody wants to show me, right? Because I'm like, if you're scrolling your phone for 5 hours today, like you have time, right? Like it's like you didn't. And so, and I'm not saying that, trust me, I don't want to show anyone mine, but I don't say that I don't have time, right? Because I think we like to tell ourselves these things. But another thing, there's a wonderful book. There's actually two that kind of the same concept, but there's Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect and James Clear's Atomic Habits. And if we could all understand that, like, this compound effect, right? You're not trying to change your life in a month. That's the problem. Is everyone's like, okay, I want to do it. I want to have a side hustle. And I want to have everything up. It's like, first of all, that's never how it works. But take that pressure off, right? With anything, like when we talk about weight loss, right? Someone saying I'm going to lose 10 pounds in a month is likely not going to be successful. Maybe they'll lose it and then they'll gain it, right? But you start saying, like, how can I incorporate health and fitness in my life every single week? And it's the same thing. So what I tell a lot of my students is, like, find 3 hours a week. I'm not talking about a day. I'm saying a week. So you do, like, your lunch break on Tuesday. You wake up 1 hour early on Wednesday. It's from 6 to 7. You do 1 hour at night. You're finding 3 hours. In a year, that's 156 hours, which comes out to, like, if you divide that by 4, that's a whole month of a 40-hour work week. So, like, if someone said, I will give you a month to work full time on your side hustle, you would take it. You'd be like, yeah, I could do a month. Yeah. So we're just saying, do it over a year, right? That time is going to pass. Like, you don't have to have everything figured out in 2020, but put yourself in a position that in 2023, you're going to be, like, your side hustle is going to be up and running and you can quit your job, right? Figure out, like, we all want it so fast and then it doesn't happen. So then we just don't do it. And then in a year, 5 years, 10 years, we're still miserable. So it's like,
then you're your grandma in 20 years has gone by.
Totally, 100%. And I always say this is, like, stop looking at this like 1 year goal. I'm not saying, like, it's good to work in 1 year goals or 3 months goals, but, like, things don't have to be figured out by then. It's like you can have things in a couple of years. And I mean, I just think, like, the amount, like, there's that quote where we underestimate what we can do we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. Or it's like, you can overestimate what we do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a month. All of that applies. The more long-term it becomes, we're underestimating how much change we can actually implement. And it just requires changing your perspective. Like, you don't have to get it all done this week.
Yeah. I had a friend tell me the other day that she was going to lose 60 pounds before May. And I was like, that's like in 60 days, right? Like, and she goes, you don't think I could do it? And I said, it's impossible. Why would you even know? Like, you could lose 60 pounds maybe in like 18 months, but you wouldn't say 60 pounds in 60 days, right? And I think that you're right. Like, everybody wants, and you said it yourself too, like, okay, I'm going to give myself a year and I'm going to make sure that I'm successful over here. And if I'm not, I'm going back, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I wanted to do with this conversation, is just open up to people. Like, what are your expectations? What are your expectations around being happy, enjoying what you do as a career? What are your expectations around failure? Like, what are you making it mean? Totally. What are your expectations when you see someone like Goalie, who's worked her whole life to become a lawyer? What would you say to her if she was like, I'm thinking of quitting, and I don't know what I'm going to do? If you're the kind of person that would say, girl, you're an attorney. I remember you telling me this story. I think it was your aunt. It was a family member. You said, I'm really thinking about, like, quitting being a lawyer. And someone said, but you're such a great lawyer. And she said, you've literally never been in my courtroom. You've never practiced with me. Seen me practice, right? I thought it was so ridiculous, so right? And so I want to know, to our listeners, are you the kind of person that would ask really dumb questions like that? And if you are, tell somebody something stupid like that. If that's the case, ask yourself what fears you might be hiding behind and what unhappiness you might be suppressing and what fears are probably holding you back from doing something different. And lastly, I'll say very recently, lots of people want the path illuminated. They want to know that it will be problem-free. They want to know that this is the way that God's calling them. They want to know, it's like you want all this knowing, but isn't part of life about just discovery and curiosity and having fun along the way? Right. And so I just got to say, friend, I'm really proud of you.
Oh, you're so sweet.
You are like, I tried this thing. It's not really working out, but it's all good. Yeah. I'm pivoting. I went to this event. It wasn't really my favorite. Won't go next year. Yeah. Like, you're very cool about just experiencing things. And I want to give you a lot of credit for that, because it seems like the old Goalie that I didn't know. We might not have been good friends.
No.
You were very much like, I need to know that this is going to work.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't have liked her. Nobody really. I didn't like her. I didn't like her. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's funny. My husband said that the other day. We were like having dinner and he's like, if you would have told me that like Goalie Kalkhoran was on Instagram, like not caring what people are thinking about her, talking to people, like giving other people advice, quitting her job. He's like, I would have laughed at you. Like,
wow.
I was so the person that was like the model child, the model like lawyer, like all of my, glowing reviews always. Like I always wanted everyone to just be happy and like me. And I think that I see myself, and I think like, God, we talk about like having the patience, but like change. When I look back, like in 6 years, I'm a completely different person. I mean, my mindset, everything. I'm obviously like way happier because of it. But yeah, I mean, everything to what you just said, Janelle, I think it's just so important to really start doing that inner work and looking at yourself and seeing like, where are these fears stopping you, and where are you kind of projecting and getting triggered because you have something deep within you that you're like kind of suffocating. You're not even letting come up, so you can't even understand why you're feeling that thing. And I think a lot of this stuff, if you can give yourself that grace to kind of like be compassionate and explore it and understand that you're just a human being having a human experience, like you open yourself up to so much. And one thing I will say though, you were just saying like everyone wants the path illuminated. I always find this funny because I have people come on my podcast, and inevitably every story has like, as we've all heard on all these podcasts of people that build businesses, it's failures and successes, right? And we all love an underdog story, and we all love this like, oh, I tried this business and it failed, and then I tried this other business and it failed. And like when I'm now very observant of watching people that are successful, and I see like, okay, yeah, they're like, they did this business and it took off in a year because they've had 4 other businesses, right?
Right.
And we see that, we understand it intellectually, but then we don't want it for ourselves, right? It's like, but I want to skip all that failure. And we know that like, there's no way, like you will not have success without failure. You will not, because you've never heard a story where someone says, yeah, so I started a business. I never had a problem. Everything was great, skyrocketed, haven't run into any issues. It's been amazing, right?
And you can do it too.
And you can do it, right? It's like, that doesn't happen. So why are we trying to avoid problems? Like, why are we trying to avoid failure? Like, it's going to happen, but so is the rest of it, And so it's like, I think when you can stop trying to avoid that for yourself and stop trying to have this perfect path that there will never be a misstep, you open yourself up to really actually taking the steps and having that success.
Oh, Goalie, you're amazing. I'm super proud of you. Thank you for coming on and sharing all of this with our listeners. You guys, please go listen to Goalie's podcast. It's called Lessons from a Quitter. Also, you can check her out. She's active on Instagram. She's the girl not hiding behind, should I post it? Should I not? Yeah. And I always get something great from you. So thank you for doing life with me and for being audacious and for quitting. I love that you're a quitter.
Oh, thank you guys so much. Thank you for creating this platform. I think lots of people need to be pushed, and I think you're doing just incredible work. I'm honored to be here. I'm so glad to have this conversation. I'm so glad to be doing this entrepreneurship journey Instagram world with you guys.
Amen. All right. Have a good day, Goalie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Absolutely.
And thank you guys so much for tuning into the Push Podcast. I hope you got something great out of this. I hope you will also be a quitter only after you've put in the work.
Do the time.
Do the time, and then you can be selective of what your next journey is. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to the Push Podcast. Hey, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question or there's a particular topic that you want us to tackle and you want us to help you push through, you got to do something for us. You got to go to Apple Podcasts and you got to leave a rating and a review. And in that review, go ahead and leave that question with your Instagram handle so that we can shout you out when we actually answer the question. And we'll talk about that on the podcast and make sure that, hey, this particular podcast is made for you. So leave a rating, leave a review, leave your handle, and until next time,